This is American Family News. I'm Steve Jordahl. Spain's coronavirus deaths jumped by a record number Tuesday as the country's medical system strained to care for its tens of thousands of infected patients, and the world total climbed to more than 800,000 cases. In the U.S., where the spread of the coronavirus has been accelerating, New York's governor begged for health care reinforcements, saying up to 1 million more workers are needed. Spain and Italy are struggling to avoid the collapse of their health care systems. In Spain, where hospitals in at least half of its 17 regions are at or very near their ICU bed limit, and more than 13,000 medical workers are among the country's reported 94,000-plus infections. A federal appeals court has upheld Texas's order to halt unnecessary medical procedures, including abortions. Here's Fox's Jeff Manasso.
The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals reverses an order by a federal judge who Monday allowed abortion providers to continue performing elective abortions after Governor Greg Abbott temporarily halted non-essential or elective surgeries and procedures. Planned Parenthood sued Texas as well as other states for similar orders, calling abortions essential surgeries. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton saying abortion providers who refuse state law are demonstrating a clear disregard for Texans suffering from the coronavirus crisis. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
President Trump's new chief of staff has left a new vacancy in the House of Representatives. Here's Fox's Jared Halpern with more.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi presided over the House chamber for a brief pro forma session, the first session since North Carolina Republican Mark Meadows officially resigned from Congress.
In light of the resignation of the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Meadows, the whole number of the House is 429.
Meadows' first full day as White House Chief of Staff is today, though he's been serving the president in an unofficial capacity for a few weeks and took part in negotiations last week over a $2.2 trillion economic rescue bill. A Republican primary runoff election is set for June. Jared Halpern, Fox News.
The Department of Homeland Security has included firearms manufacturers, distribution and retail, and gun ranges as essential critical services. Here's AFN's Chris Woodward.
The National Shooting Sports Foundation, the trade association for the firearm and ammunition industry, is grateful for the inclusion of the industry during the COVID-19 pandemic. NSSF's Mark Oliva.
We had worked with the White House and with the Department of Homeland Security since March 20th to get firearms businesses listed among those. That includes manufacturers, your retailers, your distributors, and your ranges. And the reasoning is simple. I mean, it's we need to be able to provide those individuals who choose to exercise their Second Amendment rights to be able to protect themselves in times of uncertainty like this, with the ability to purchase the firearms that they choose.
Once a person's ability to exercise his or her rights to lawfully obtain a firearm through the legal process is denied, then Oliva says we have a breakdown in the security and the safety of our society.
We recommend to everyone who's gone out and bought new firearms, and from what we're hearing is upwards of 80 to 90% of these buyers could be brand new gun owners, that they explore their safe storage options, understand how to use the locks that come with those guns to keep them away from those people who should never have them, including small children. And to, if they can, get to a range, learn how to use that firearm safely, learn how to engage the safety mechanisms, and make sure that you understand the responsibilities that come with firearms ownership.
I'm Chris Woodward.
And finally, a California woman was sentenced Tuesday to 7 months in prison for paying bribes to rig her two daughters' college admission exams and get one of them into Georgetown University as a fake tennis recruit. The judge has delayed the sentence until June, hoping the coronavirus pandemic has passed. Elizabeth Henriquez and her husband were charged with paying $400,000 in bribes to get their oldest daughter into Georgetown. They also paid bribes to have someone cheat on their daughter's college entrance exams. For American Family News, I'm Steve Jordahl.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Neil Haley Show's Freedom from Addiction segment. And I'm excited to welcome to the program Reverend Wynn Henderson. Wynn, how are you? It just seems like Groundhog Day in so many ways. And today's topic is going to be an update to the coronavirus and where we're at, yourself, how you are just hanging in there, and how our lives have changed in so many ways.
Absolutely. The whole world is turned upside down in less than a month, hasn't it? So I'm sheltering in place. It means I'm only going out for groceries or something really important, and it gives me more time to think about what's happening and to be able to talk to you and other people. So that's a positive.
Oh, it absolutely is a positive, and it's something that we have to try to look at in so many ways, and look at how people are going to act differently, how different responses in our daily routine are going to be thrown off, how people that we deal with on a regular basis are going to fly off the handle, to just different, the way we interact as a society has changed in just a short period of time.
I think that if we were attacked by a military opponent, that there would be less confusion and fear than by this virus. So, back in World War II, the country galvanized and people were at home and they were doing all kinds of things to support the military. And in a way, it's similar. It's an attack, but we don't have a known attacker in this particular case.
No, we don't. We definitely don't have a known attacker, and the unknown and uncertainty. And this is the point I'm going to make in this, and then I want to hear what your take is. I think this is more of a conversation for your podcast and my nationally syndicated radio. You talk to John Q. Public. We don't know when this is going to end.
That's true. We don't know when it's going to end. Everybody says it's going to get worse before it gets better, and that's about the major thing that I've gotten out of listening to the news.
How many cases do you have in your area?
Well, I'm in a mountainous area of western North Carolina, and our population of our town is 3,000. We don't have any, but we do have one in the lower part of the county.
What about the state of North Carolina? I don't know if you have the numbers. Like, for example, Pennsylvania, Allegheny County out in has like 130 cases. I guess Pennsylvania has 1,000 plus. The concern I have is all the big cities are going to be flooded with coronavirus. And so rural areas like yourself are going to be more in a safe situation. But how do we keep from really maybe having now to self-quarantine more and have the right resources to get people, once they know they have the virus, not infecting everyone after they get diagnosed?
Yeah, that's a real problem. And as they get more testing kits out there so that everybody can get tested if they want to, we'll know what the true impact of the disease is.
Absolutely, the true impact of the disease and all those different things. So, what is your take from this? What should you tell your listeners and my listeners about the update on the coronavirus?
Okay, let me start by going directly to the listeners. I want you to know that it's a pleasure to have you listening to my show today. My sincerest desire is for you to get something from it that will make your life richer and fuller. Now, I'm Reverend Wynn Henderson. As an ordained Christian minister and a medical doctor, I have a dual perspective to bring you content to solve problems in your life. Freedom from Addiction and Share Your Mission is the longest running, single hosted and produced radio internet talk show in the country. It has been continuously running for the last 20 years. I introduce you to celebrities and non-celebrities alike who have something to say about the disease of addiction in any of its 30 plus different forms, and about the importance of finding your mission or purpose in life and then acting on it. So today, we're going to give you a couple of updates about the coronavirus. And first, I would like to tell you something about inflammation. Now, inflammation is a process the body uses to deal with infection or injury. The major problem with decreasing inflammation is that it inhibits the body from dealing effectively with infections like, in our discussion today, the coronavirus. Decreasing inflammation by use of nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, also known as NSAID, NSAIDs, lowers our defense response to the coronavirus. Now, researchers have linked inflammation to nearly every chronic disease of aging. Chronic inflammation is a slow creeping condition caused by misfiring of the immune system that keeps your body in a long-term state of high alert. When cells are in distress, they release chemicals that alert the immune system. And then white blood cells rush to the scene where they work to eat up bacteria, viruses, and damaged cells from infection or injury. It is often chronic inflammation and not the viruses themselves that cause much of the long-term damage. Obesity, unregulated stress, tobacco use, alcohol use, lack of physical activity, poor sleep, and poor diet are all linked to chronic inflammation. And the big four for treating chronic inflammation are food, sleep, stress release, and exercise. The difference between someone feeling okay and feeling great is often the exercise. Now we'll get into a report that people are talking about that was on the internet recently. The French health minister put out a report saying ibuprofen might be harmful in the treatment of coronavirus, but this is theoretical. Nothing has yet been proven scientifically with a randomized double-blind study. The World Health Organization is not aware of scientific randomized double-blind studies dealing with the effect ibuprofen would have on the coronavirus. Some other health experts say that NSAIDs could weaken the immune system when taken in connection with an active infection. The coronavirus has been looked at as open studies, but not the scientifically based random double-blind studies, which is the real answer to getting at the truth of a question. Now, what is an anecdotal report? Now, this is a type of report which is not necessarily true or reliable because it is based on personal opinions rather than substantiated facts or the research I just talked about. An ICU nurse has posted on the internet an anecdotal report that practically all our patients with coronavirus had ibuprofen in their system and concluded, her opinion, that it made the disease 10 times worse. She said that ibuprofen kickstarts the virus into pneumonia. Now, this is not proven by valid scientific research at this point. Out of an abundance of caution, do not use ibuprofen, which is the world's most widely used nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drug, as a fever and pain-reducing drug in the case of coronavirus infections. Paracetamol, which is most commonly sold under the brand name Tylenol, or generically under the name acetaminophen, should be used as a fever and pain-reducing drug instead.
Wow.
What do you think about that?
I mean, see, and that's the thing, that if you can figure out certain things like this, then you're going to find out what happens with the virus. I think one thing we have to look at, the United States, the number of cases. Let's look at the number of deaths versus other countries and then let's have a talk. We all want to push, we have more cases, almost more cases than Italy or all those places. Well, we have more population, first of all. And second of all, what about deaths? And so let's look at the most important thing. How many people are dying? And if we can decrease the people who die, that should be the numbers that we should look at in the next 2 to 3 months.
So with that story about ibuprofen, even though it's not scientifically based on a study, it still is something to keep in your mind about. If you've got an alternative drug that doesn't have this report and is not an NSAID, why not use it? It only makes sense.
Exactly. It's a great point. It's a great topic, and it was perfect for the Neil Haley Show's Freedom from Addiction segment. People could check you out at RevWinHendersonMD.com. There they can check out all the different resources you have available and all your social media channels. They can check you out as well, and it's a great resource involving ibuprofen. So your recommendation, don't take it. If you have a fever or something, take Tylenol until this crisis is over.
Now, Neil, I've got one other thing I want to tell you.
Sure.
I got a postcard from the government, and it came in yesterday. If things change so quickly, it was printed March 16th. But it says President Trump's coronavirus guidelines for America. And I want to tell you what those guidelines are, since you may have been getting them bits and pieces. Okay. I know you have.
Oh, is that the 15-day thing that Vice President Pence talked about 4 days ago? I guess you've gotten it now. Okay.
Well, let me tell you what they are. The government says, listen and follow the directions of your state and local authorities. If you feel sick, stay at home. Do not go to work. If your children are sick, keep them at home. Contact your medical provider. If you're an older person or have a serious underlying health condition, stay at home and away from other people. Even if you're young or otherwise healthy, you are at risk and your activities can increase the risk to others. It is critical that you do your part to slow the spread of the coronavirus. If you work or study, do it from home whenever possible. Avoid social gatherings and groups of more than 10 people. And I think those guidelines may be a little bit less today, but
yes.
Avoid eating or drinking at bars and restaurants. Use their pickup service or their delivery options. Avoid discretionary travel, shopping trips, and social visits. Do not visit nursing homes or retirement or long-term care facilities unless you're there to provide critical assistance. And finally, and very importantly, practice good hygiene. Wash your hands, especially after touching any frequently used item or surface. Avoid touching your face. Sneeze or cough into a tissue or the inside of your elbow. And disinfect frequently used items and surfaces as much as possible. So that's my program today. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss anything. The link to the podcast is www.freedomfromaddiction.libsyn.com. Spell Libsyn, Libsyn. And you can get more information, as Neil told you, at my website, which is www.revwinhendersonmd.com. Now, have a great day.
All right. You're listening to Neil Haley's Show's Freedom from Addiction segment, and we'll talk next week. Good day, everyone.
Welcome to Safety Talk. Personal safety expert Pete Canavan shares his insights and interviews experts who provide simple and effective tips, techniques, and technologies to keep you safe and secure both online and off. Here's Pete.
Hello and welcome to Safety Talk. I am your host and personal safety expert, Pete Canavan. We've got another great guest for you guys today that will be talking about yet another perspective on personal safety, and we'll be providing you with some really great tips. So our guest is the president of the Electrical Safety Foundation International, ESFI. ESFI is the premier nonprofit organization that is dedicated exclusively to promoting electrical safety, both at home and at the workplace. They've been around since 1994 and have led the way in promoting electrical safety across North America. They've become highly regarded by industry, by the media, and also by consumer safety partners. They also provide unique awareness and educational resources that are designed to meet the diverse needs of at-risk groups, because each year too many lives are disrupted by electrical fires, and too many families unfortunately mourn the loss of a loved one who is fatally injured by electricity while they're on the job. Electricity can kill if we're not careful. So in fact, when I was researching information for my college safety book on chapter 10 on dorm room safety and writing the part about electrical, I discovered that more college students die from fires each year than anything else. And many of these are electrical in nature. Now, this gentleman was appointed president of ESFI in 2005. In the last 14 years, he's developed aggressive marketing and awareness campaigns to advance electrical safety. This has helped to establish ESFI as the primary source for unbiased electrical safety information that reduces the instances of fires, injuries, and deaths. He's currently serving on the National Fire Protection Association's Educational Messages Advisory Council, that's a mouthful, and the UL Labs, Underwriter Laboratories Consumer Advisory Council. So after that long introduction, it's my pleasure to welcome Brent Brenner, president of the Electrical Safety Foundation International. Welcome to Safety Talk, Brent.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Sure. Great to have you on the show. Thanks for being here. We're excited to have you join us because, obviously improving safety and security is what we are all about here at Safety Talk. And this is a topic we have not specifically addressed on the show. And I'm always psyched when we do that because sometimes we have guests on that are covering topics that are similar or the same as what we've had in the past. So we're always looking for new ways to educate people on how they can stay safe. And, one of the things that I was reading about some of the information you guys provide is even some tips about, purchasing electronic goods, which should come in hand here as the holidays are approaching, right?
Absolutely. It's probably one of our busier times of year, just folks realizing how, dependent we are on energy. It's like, searching around to charge your phone at an airport. That's usually the thing I draw back to, and folks can really resonate. It really resonates with folks in the fact that, we're just so dependent upon electricity in our daily lives. And almost everything that we do, it's I have friends of mine that say, what do you do for work? And I basically say, well, when the power goes off, that's kind of what I do. It gives you a really good idea of how many things in our life are electricity dependent, and it continues to grow, and technology continues to progress towards needing more and more energy. We might be more efficient, but energy is still vital to how our daily lives work and how productive we can be. So it affects everything, and people just kind of take it for granted. Now, that's a great thing when it comes to, a lot of folks on our channel do a great job of doing things behind the scenes, designing codes and standards that keep us safe, creating technology that you don't even have to think about. So things like the ground fault circuit interrupters that have been in your bathrooms since, the 60s, those have drastically decreased deaths when it comes to in-home electrical issues. And so a lot of the stuff we do is behind the scenes, but you quickly can kind of realize how important it is to our daily lives, especially as technology, advances and requires more battery power.
Yeah, and it is amazing that, we do take it for granted, yet, the electricity as we know it, hasn't existed for all that long. It wasn't all that long that, if you wanted light, it was lighting a candle. It wasn't, going over and flipping a switch. And we have become very dependent on it in every industry. The technology between, being so dependent on electricity as well as technology, the two of these things go hand in hand, because obviously you can't have IT and the whole infrastructure of technology without the electricity that powers it. And when there is a problem, it causes chaos in a very short period of time. For example, just a couple of days here where I live here in Pennsylvania, a car hit an electrical pole, was maybe 3 or 4 miles away from me. Well, I guess whatever pole this individual hit with their car took out electricity for a large part of the town nearby. It caused my power here miles away to go out for a little bit. It caused problems in other communities well up the road. So, and when that happens, it's a trickle-down effect, because now you have issues with the computers that were connected to the electricity that were actually in the middle of a process when the electricity went down. And even though some of these systems might be on, UPSs and, battery backups, uninterruptible power sources, they can still drain when the power's out for too long. And that's exactly what happened. So later that day and into the next day, which was yesterday, I had customers calling me, because I'm an IT consultant. I have a lot of clients saying, hey, I got a problem with my computer. It's not coming back on. It's got a blue screen. It's not starting back up. So I was running around like a madman yesterday, putting out, no pun intended, fires with my clients, because some of them had issues whereby if the power was out for like 45 minutes, well, it's great that their server's on a UPS that can last for 15 minutes, but if they're not in the office to safely shut it down and nobody knows about it, it's going to drain out and the thing's going to still abnormally turn off, and you could have problems, and now you got to go back and rely on your backups if data is corrupted. And so it's a total trickle-down effect, not just in the IT industry, but in every industry, right? I mean, financial and education, everything is affected.
Absolutely. And this is, a lot of folks don't realize, how dependent we are on electricity. And so when you start hearing, maybe politicians or things that you kind of roll your eyes at, and maybe you don't think that's going to affect you, but we're talking about an electrical grid, or we're talking about the infrastructure that's aging pretty drastically. A lot of the things that are going on in politics are going to trickle down to the energy that we receive, and that is only exacerbated, and you can see the problems that pop up when disasters happen, whether it's a winter storm that might be coming around the corner, floods and those type of things, or even things like terrorism. You just never know. And when things happen like that, it really identifies, or it really wakes people up. Unfortunately, they don't kind of keep their finger on this, but they don't realize that, eventually things will come back online and life gets back to quote unquote normal. But you've got to be a little more prepared. So imagine if you're a business, we try to tell people the best, you don't need medicine after you're sick. You want to try to be proactive with your planning. And so it's about energy storage and backup. It's about having a plan and how you get your workers back into work to be able to work for you and get your factory moving again. So there's a lot of things that people just don't realize that they can adversely affect them, just in their personal life, but also their professional life. And so we always tell people it's time to start thinking before something happens, but disasters, can happen at any time. And it could be something as simple as, like you were saying, somebody hitting a light pole. Who knows when that's going to happen? And so it's just one of those things that you just got to realize how dependent we are on energy, and what kind of backup systems you have in place, especially if they're vital to your business and or your person. So it's just something to think about. So a lot of this stuff, in a weird way, we're all kind of part of the bigger ecosystem. And so I would just say that you got to think bigger picture sometimes and realize how this stuff might affect you at a local level, not just the national level. So I think people are starting to, have those conversations now. But again, it kind of comes down to the person realizing what their needs are and what's most important to them. So when it comes to, disasters that happen and the need for portable generators, and we've seen a lot of things that have been positive for portable generators, but when people have power and they're applying it the wrong way, it can kill linemen if the things are plugged in the incorrect way and causing backfeed and not having things permanently installed. We see a lot of carbon monoxide deaths because people just don't know how to use it. They just turn it on and just think everything is fine. And simple things like, it's hot in the house, so somebody opens a window and that creates a way for carbon monoxide to get into a house. And so there's a lot of things that come from our needs for energy, and you just need to think a little bit bigger picture about things. And I don't mean to get on a diatribe, but you really kind of see how it affects and it trickles down to every part of our lives.
Of course. And it's something that when you take it for granted, we don't even think about it when it's working. But when it's not working, all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a minute, I can't access money out of an ATM. Oh, wait a minute, I can't go to the gas station and get gas because the pumps rely on electricity to pull the gas out of the ground. Oh, I can't make coffee in the morning if I don't have electricity, right? I mean, from the most basic way that we view and use electricity in our daily lives to the most complex way of using it, whether it's in the most high-end technologies out there, we've got to really be aware of how that electricity and how we can protect ourselves from problems related to it. Now, you mentioned something that I thought, Brent, was real interesting and I wanted to talk about for a minute, and that's the aging infrastructure of our entire power grid. And I'm sure you're someone that is well aware of this, that there are only about, a couple of handfuls, maybe 16 or so massive power stations around the country that all the electricity in the United States, and I guess it's North America as well, goes through, that if there were ever a major problem with even just one of those, it could impact, potentially millions and millions of people. And these are not things that you can just go buy a new one off the shelf. They're special ordered. They come from out of the country. It takes, 6 months to a year to get one of them. And so if we have some sort of problem where these things start to fail, or there is a coordinated terror attack on those substations around the country, I mean, we could all be in for a big wake-up call and a big problem.
Yep, absolutely. And it's one of those things where I think people think, oh, it'll never happen. But when just our first 5 minutes or 10 minutes of this discussion, you can see how the trickle down really would affect you as an individual. And I can tell you that as efficient as our economy is, and as efficient as we are, believe it or not, things will dry up really, really quickly if we don't keep the wheel greased and keep things moving. I mean, we're talking about a storm when it comes up. The new storm. I'm outside of Washington D.C. and it's always funny. The first things to go are the bread, the milk, and the eggs, and that disappears off the shelf within a day and a half if you're lucky. And so imagine if you didn't have electricity for a couple days, what it would look like and the chaos that would ensue. And so we're a just-in-time world. And a lot of those things, if the system gets bogged down in any which way, shape, or form, it causes problems down the food chain, if you will. So it's one of those things that I think it's just a realization that we need to think bigger picture. And I think the one good thing about politics is the fact that they kind of see it from a 30,000-foot view, and they really realize that there are some things that we got to think bigger picture about. And I think that the government agencies are really on top of this stuff. But the problem is there's a lot of things that need to happen, and we need a lot of blue-collar folks to go out and string lines and put up power poles and making sure that things are working correctly. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. To your point, it's not an easy fix. It's not a quick fix. And this is why infrastructure, I think, is so vitally important. And we're not just talking about infrastructure like building roads. It's really about making sure that we're not vulnerable in other ways that we didn't even think about.
And the electrical infrastructure is so old and it is aging and is very susceptible to failure. And the amount of money and time and effort that it will take to overhaul it is doable. But every day, every week, every year that goes by, it gets more and more difficult and becomes more and more of an issue. So until I think legislation comes down and a commitment is made by the federal government to overhaul the electrical infrastructure, we're still going to be vulnerable from cascading events. We're still going to be vulnerable from terror attacks. We're still going to be vulnerable from things like EMP-related incidents, which can happen from a variety of things. I mean, that's the biggest threat that I feel from a foreign nation that wanted to bring us to our knees. They wouldn't do it directly because they, if they were engaged in a long, drawn-out, protracted, war with the United States, it's not going to work. But if they took out our electricity, we'll destroy ourselves in a matter of time. So, how about the Internet of Things? And we're gonna get into some of the specifics with the home electrical and things like that. But just as we're talking, it's making me go off on a few things here that are causing getting the wheels spinning here. The Internet of Things is something that we're beginning to talk and hear a lot about as people are beginning to use this technology in more and more ways. With holidays coming up, a lot of people are probably maybe buying gifts like these Ring doorbells and the SimpliSafe items that are connecting our homes to electricity and to the internet in ways that we never had before. And it's most people don't know this, I'm sure you do, that you can actually hack into devices that are connected simply by hacking into their electronic signature, right? Like coming right in through the electricity that powers these devices.
Yep. Yeah, we it is definitely an evolving interest for a lot of folks. One of the things that we're going to be, one of our big proactive months that we have is May is Electrical Safety Month, and so you'll see things coming from your folks in the fire department that we have a relationship with, folks that we have in utilities that provide electricity. One of the things we're going to be doing this year is really focusing on, all right, well, all that stuff sounds great, but how does it actually relate back to me, the consumer, and what can I kind of do, even relating back to some of the preparedness that you have. And so we're going to be looking at things from obviously a safety point of view, but how that kind of trickles down through security and efficiency and all that kind of stuff. And so when you start to think about your electrical system in your home, let's kind of put that in perspective. So you have homes on average were built in the 70s. And so you have an electrical code at that time where you were lucky to have maybe 2 outlets in a room. A lot of people are kind of misusing electricity in their own homes. And how does that kind of relate to kind of where we are now? Well, I think there's an opportunity for us to kind of, if we respect electricity and understand some of the dangers that are associated with it, what are we really doing to kind of update our homes that were built in the 70s to kind of meet today's needs? And a lot of that stuff comes to the fact that you don't have enough plugs to plug all these things in. You're using extension cords or power strips, and they're not necessarily solving your problem, and they're also causing a stress on your electrical system in your home. And what that does is when that electrical system is being overused, or you're using things as it was not intended for, that's when we see a lot of the home fires pop up. And a great example, and I don't want to get on a tangent, but it's really relative at this time of year.
No, because I wanted to talk about the home stuff, so this is perfect.
Yeah, so we see a lot of Christmas tree fires right around this time of year, obviously, because you're putting electrical and things that heat up on a Christmas tree, and if that tree is a natural tree and it's drying out, we see the majority of our tree fires is basically after Christmas into New Year's. So basically those 7 or 8 days that we have are the most deadly when it comes to having a real tree in your home. And it just kind of exacerbates the problem. You're putting kindling around a heat source, and that's
right,
when things kind of spark. And
storm.
When Christmas is over, they stop watering the tree. I get it, but that's when things are most dangerous. And so, when we're talking about the security and the safety and the efficiency, it kind of goes hand in hand. So in my house, and I was probably a little bit ahead of the curve because I had access to things before they kind of hit the market. But, you're talking about your Amazon Alexa, your Google Home, smart hubs and stuff like that. There is a lot of safety and security when it comes to having lights on. Number one, it keeps you safe from not tripping up the stairs or making a fall, which is the biggest killer of anything else that's out there by far. So it all kind of goes hand in hand. Not to mention, if you've got things on that are easy to time out, where you just have it automatically shut off, so your Christmas tree shuts off in this season. You've got some safety measures built in that give you kind of a peace of mind. And so maybe you're not home, you're on vacation, but you can have things set up where it really just gives you peace of mind or sense of security, efficiency, absolutely. So all this stuff, it's kind of opening up Pandora's box for us to talk about all these different things that are out there. And we rely on, to get back to one of your earlier points, we rely on the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to be able to access and use these systems. Now, I can tell you, it's just like when the computer started coming out and drove you crazy with why things weren't working and, the internet lag and all that kind of great stuff. We're going to have those hiccups. There's no doubt about it. But this is the way the future is going. So you need to kind of make sure you're using the right stuff, making sure that you're being real with yourself and realizing the more things that you're bringing into your home, there's more opportunities for people to kind of maybe spy on you. So we're talking about cameras on your phones and all that kind of good stuff. There are some security concerns, but I think that the negative side is outweighed by the safety and security that all this stuff gives you. And I think it's going to be a way of life, and it's going to impact the way we use energy. It's going to impact the way that we, spend money in our homes to make things more convenient and useful. And all that at the end of the day provides that security and efficiency that we they're after effects. And so it's kind of a nice thing that if we do this stuff the right way, it really is a great system that works together.
So I'd like to get into some of the specifics of that. Like, for example, one of the things that the ESFI does is have safety across different industries and on different topics. So like for right now, I have your website pulled up. So those watching the video can see. If you're listening to this podcast or rebroadcast, you can go to esfi.org and look at this. But you've got a great breakdown of resources and information on the website, from home safety to workplace, disaster safety, as we're talking about, kid safety, which is a big one. I want to get into that. And then, of course, the different programs and initiatives you guys have and resources. Now, home electrical safety, a lot of people are home around the holidays. They're spending more and more time there. We're not always at home, which is where some of this technology we're just talking about can help, because we can help keep an eye on the home and that sort of thing. But simply understanding some basics about electricity and how it works can go a long way. Like you said, a lot of homes are older that people may be living in. They don't have enough electrical outlets, or maybe they don't have properly grounded outlets. So they got the old 2-prong instead of the 3-prong. So people are, I've seen crazy things when I've gone to customer sites, whether it's in homes or in businesses, where they bend the ground plug off or they cut it off. And I'm like, what are you doing? You can't do this. It's been working like that for 6 months or a year. And I'm like, okay, that may be true, but it's not right. And I always try to correct those sort of issues. The overloads are a biggie. And one of the things that I, without getting too technical for people, but you need to understand the rating of the devices and what you're plugging them into, like surge protectors or battery backups. And regarding the electronics, for example, with an electrical overload, it's very simple to prevent that from happening. So if you have, for example, an extension cord that's a low, thin gauge wire that might be rated for, let's say, 325 watts, and you're running that across your room or from one place to another, that means that cord can only safely support up to that rated number. In this case, like I said, 325 watts. So if now here's where it kind of gets a little funny, right? Now you bought a surge protector and you put your surge protector into that electrical cord. Well, the surge protector is rated for 750 watts. So you're thinking, great, I can plug it up to 750 watts worth of stuff here. And people aren't even looking at the rating of the items, right? But you can't, because the cord that power strip is plugged into is only rated for less than half of that. So it's simple to understand when people are educated on very basic how-tos about electricity, and they can basically calculate it with simple math, the safe rating of various devices, because people's heads start to spin when you start talking about volts and amps and watts, and I don't understand this, I'm not an electrician. You don't have to be, but it's simple. And I'm not going to get into this because I'm sure you probably have resources on your website as well. And when we post this out, maybe we'll put some links to things, some calculators, but like laptop power supplies, you're plugging it into an old home, the output is listed at so many volts and so many amps. You have to multiply those two things together to get the watts. So if you got a 19 volt power supply and it's rated for like 4.74 amps, you multiply them together, that's 90 watts. Now you got a device that's going to pull 90 watts. And you just do that simple calculation if it's not already on the device, and add it up and say, hey, is what I'm plugging in exceeding the rating of my power strip or the cord I'm plugging it into? And if it is, unplug something, plug it in somewhere else.
Yeah, and typically what happens is you start to have higher up the electrical chain, you have a breaker that's tripping, and so it becomes a nuisance. And that's usually when people start to say, oh, you know what, maybe I'm using too much energy, or maybe I need to think about this in a much larger in a much larger way in terms of your whole electrical system. And that's usually the trigger that makes people update their electrical system when something goes wrong, or they need to have additional power. And so I think we're gonna come to a time, and this happened just to kind of provide some perspective. My grandfather said he lived in rural Pennsylvania, and he basically said, the only reason I updated from fuses to breaker box is because, your mom and all of her sisters kept, tripping everything when they plugged in the hairdryer, and I got tired of going to the basement. So, it just kind of puts it in perspective where it's like, you really need to kind of think of this. And I realize it's not the sexiest thing in the world, and all of us take it for granted. But it's one of those things where, if you want it to work the way it should safely, you need to kind of do a little bit of research and making sure you're not putting yourself in a dangerous situation. And I think
you talked about trees being a cause of fires, obviously this type of year. What are some other common causes of fires in the home in this case that people should be aware of?
Well, I always say it's the big energy need devices. So one of the things that we see pop up this time of year is space heaters. We have, if you think about it, most of the homes in the South were not necessarily geared to or designed in a way where they can support loads at that level with other things plugged into that same outlet. And so you have people that are using space heaters around combustibles. They're just not thinking about it. And maybe those space heaters have never caused a problem for 15 years, but it just takes one time with an animal knocking something over, you tripping over it, or something getting in the way where it starts a fire. And that's usually pretty catastrophic because it's an issue that most people just don't think about. Or they're falling asleep with a space heater. That's another big issue that we see a lot of times. And so it's one of those things where, I think that people just need to respect electricity a little bit more. It's electricity, the way I like to kind of categorize it. It's something you can't see, can't smell, can't taste, but it'll damn sure kill you if you do something wrong. And I can tell you that the devices that are in your home, 99.99% of the time, the device is absolutely safe. The wire behind your wall is safe. Everything is safe, like physically. So the mechanicals are all safe. The problem is when you add the human nature to things, and you have folks doing things themselves and jerry-rigging things, and becoming their own instant electrician or overloading circuits. That's when things are they're used out of the scope of what they were designed to use for. And so it just takes a little bit of time to understand kind of what your needs are, what the system's capable of, and then you got to figure it out from there, what needs to happen. And I realize, we always say, you really only have one chance to have an electrical system put in, and that's when the home is new. Well, homes are lasting for 75 to 100 years, and even then they're just being remodeled, and people don't want to spend the unfortunately $500 to $7,500 it takes to redo a home's electrical system. They'd rather spend that on granite countertops. I get it.
Yeah, not thinking that what's the better use of those funds. It's like, well, the electricity is working, but I want my home to look nicer for people coming over. It's a problem. Like you said, it's not the sexiest topic, but yet it's one that can make the difference between life and death, literally. In a lot of cases, whether it's electrocution or a fire being caused by an overloaded circuit. You have something, and I have it pulled up on the website here, under the home safety, don't overload your home. You've got this great infographic here that talks about overloaded circuit warning signs. So, this is a great resource for people to know, hey, how do I even know if I'm overloading the circuit of my home? Well, go to esfi.org's site and take a look at some of this information. And if you are experiencing some of these warning signs, you better start unplugging some things and get an electrician in there to take a look and say, hey, yeah, you're overloading the circuit. And, what happens if that circuit breaker doesn't trip? Now things start to melt and fry, and now fires can spark. So it's a very, very important topic. People now Christmas lights on their home, right? Everybody, trying to outdo the neighbors, the old, the Griswolds, right? You're putting all these lights outside, you're overloading your circuits. The electric companies love people this time of year because your meter starts spinning off the gauge, right? but that can be causing all kinds of overloads, and it's easily preventable when you have more awareness about it. And I think, Brett, that's kind of what you're saying is, we need some education. We need more awareness of what can happen and what's causing these problems. So what would be the best way to prevent those electrical fires? Is just that the education and the, not doing things like, running extensions cords all over, staple them to the wall and plugging in 15 things?
Yeah. So, I mean, just some basic things that I always like to tell people. It's, extension cords are meant for temporary use. That's what they're designed for.
Right.
Life is gonna kind of take over where you have furniture pinching up against a wall. Things are going to fail when they're not protected by a wall. And so you have grandpa's old lamp that might be sitting out, and that cord set might have been beat up or twisted or bitten by an animal or whatever the case might be.
Mm-hmm.
And those kind of things just exacerbate problems. And so when you start to run extension cords around because you only have one outlet, two outlets in a room, you put them under your bed to charge your cell phone at night so you have something on beside your bed. It's kind of human nature to kind of, put things in a place where you need them, but you got to realize that if something fails in that system and you don't have certain protections, you just can't take it for granted. So when it comes to extension cords, they're only meant for 30 days worth of use, temporary use. And so if you don't have enough outlets in a room, that should tell you that your system is probably not going to meet your needs. Now, the good thing is that, the electrical industry isn't stupid to this and realize that there's a lot of older homes out there that people are looking to modernize and, meet today's needs from the average consumer. And so there's technology that's coming online that even if you don't have a new house or even if you're not gutting a kitchen to do a major remodel, there are things that you can do, things like, and this is at the breaker panel, arc fault circuit interrupters. They're kind of the GFCI, the ground fault circuit interrupters in your kitchen, in your bathrooms, wherever there's water. This is kind of the next technology that came out about 15 years ago or so, and it's in the new code for new homes. But you can actually swap some of your breakers out, and what this does is it protects you and grandpa's lamp that's sitting there with a bad cord. And what it will do is it'll detect any time that there's an arc within the wire behind the wall or grandpa's cord on that lamp, that if there's an arc, it'll shut down power.
Oh, wow.
So it foolproofs things to a point where you can actually, keep it simple, stupid. What my grandfather always said is, if you can design it out and have some technology in it that's going to keep you safe, you should probably look to do that. So I can't tell everybody that's listening to this to say this is what you should do to stay safe. But what I can do is tell you that there are things that you can do and people that you can call, like an electrician, that will come in and give you an honest assessment of kind of where you're at, what the things you might want to do, and maybe you can work out a game plan where over the next 5 years you work on this, this, and this. And that provides a peace of mind. It also provides efficiency and all these, security and all this other stuff. And you can figure out maybe a plan of attack on how you can make your home safer because, the system probably hasn't been updated since the home was built.
So when should you have your home inspected? Because I'm sure, people are saying, okay, so what is a reason why, or is there some sort of guideline where, you guys say, you should have somebody come out who's a licensed electrician to inspect your system, even if you're not having a problem, every so often? I mean, when should somebody call a professional if they're not having a problem?
Typically, the system is going to tell you if something's wrong. So a breaker is going to trip. It's going to tell you that there's something wrong or you're using too much power or something like that. We don't necessarily say, there's a certain, there's not every 10 years you need to have your system inspected. It's more of, what are you doing now that has been different over the last 10 years that are going to increase your power demands? Or what are things that are going on, like the infographic that you had up before? Do you have discolored outlets where you take a step back and you kind of say, wow, that doesn't look white anymore. It kind of looks like it's a little bit, I don't know, brown. Those are telltale signs of things that are just not working correctly. And typically you're not going to see a spark. You might have something when you turn on a switch or something where you'll have a little bit of an arc. Those are kind of telltale signs that maybe things aren't necessarily right. Maybe the device has failed. Maybe somebody's done something you didn't know about. Those kind of things. But the system typically tells you. So when people look back after there's a home fire, unfortunately, they'll come back and they'll say, yeah, something was acting funny, or the lights were flickering, and yeah, I noticed that outlet was, kind of discolored, and there's always that story, like, this is where it started. Well, that doesn't surprise me, because I remember seeing stuff, I just never did anything about it. So just be proactive. I mean, look at
Don't
some telltale
ignore
signs.
something. If you don't know what it is, call somebody. Exactly. Because it's your life. Something happens in the middle of the night while you're sleeping, your carbon monoxide detector is not going to go off. Maybe your fire alarm will, but it's scary. Nobody wants to have to deal with that, with the loss of a home, or a loss of life, or somebody being seriously injured. Because it's an electrical system that is like any other system. It can't be abused, or it's going to fail and give you problems. Same thing with the plumbing in your home, same thing with anything that is in a home or in an office. So let's kind of shift gears to the workplace, and how, what are some of the ways that we're seeing problems that are electricity related in the workplace that are causing workplace injuries and fatalities?
So, oddly enough, when it comes to electricity in the workplace, same thing is kind of, if you're talking about an office environment, the same things apply as if it were in your home. One of the biggest issues they have is people bring in space heaters and plugging them in at work. So if you're in an office environment, you've got something that's not prepared for something like that big energy use of a space heater, you can get yourself in trouble. When you're talking about, outside work, overhead power lines are one of the things that most people just assume they're so far up, or they can't identify them. They call them telephone poles, or whatever you want to call them. Overhead power lines are by far one of the biggest killers outside of the home and the office. And that's usually where a lot of people just don't think that something can hurt them. And so when it comes to workplace safety, you'll have a down line, or you'll have something that you don't know what it is. It's not going to sit there like a snake and tell you it's dangerous. You're going to come up on it and not realize what it is. It'll be sitting there coiled on the ground likely, and it's not going to be sparking. It's not going to be doing anything, suspicious, but you need to stay away from that and call 911 and make sure that somebody comes out and looks at it. And I can tell you, most folks in the fire department know better than to go anywhere near electricity when something's outside like that.
One of the things that I learned years ago is that if you ever, like, say you're trapped somewhere, or maybe you're in your car and, there's an electrical, there's a storm and, power lines fall, or you're in your home and there's exposed wiring, and you kind of have to get out of the home, or get out of the workplace or the office, or wherever you happen to be, never basically use the front of your hands to push or touch anything, because electricity causes your muscles to contract, and you'll just latch onto it that much stronger. That you should always use the back of your hand if you're suspicious of anything that might have electrical power in it. Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, I can tell you that it was common practice back in the 50s in some of the codes that you actually licked your fingers, and that's how you tested for current.
Yeah, that's no good.
We've come a long way, but the 50s are not that long ago, or that's what we were doing. I would say in general, if you have any energy sources that you think might be a problem, you've got to call an expert and you've got to stay away from it. I would say that, the best place to start is something with your building engineer, or your I don't know what you call them. We call it our building engineer here, where you call them and say, hey, look, here's a potential issue that we have that we're looking at. But I can tell you that when you start talking about larger loads or larger energy systems, you can quickly get yourself into trouble in terms of opening cabinets that you shouldn't be opening. Those signs and those placards are not there for no reason. There is no bell that's going to go off. You're literally going to touch it, and you're probably just going to get yourself severely hurt or killed. So don't go near electricity if you don't have to. There's all kinds of safety precautions that people are trained on how to work with electricity, or something does go wrong, they're protected. You as a layperson should not be messing with electricity at all. And I would say that your building manager is probably not qualified to do half the stuff that they do when it comes to electricity. I would also throw out there that, when you start to say, all right, I'm gonna string this extension cord somewhere so I have power, or I'm gonna use a generator because I need power in this location, or even if I'm gonna climb up on a ladder and change a light bulb. Those are all things that are electrically based, where you need to kind of just take a step back, think about it. If you're on top of a ladder changing on a light bulb, are you going to get shocked by something? I mean, you just got to think, are you qualified to do the job? If you're not, get somebody that is. And then don't overestimate your ability, and don't underestimate the danger of electricity when it comes to things you're touching.
Well, you even have on your website, I mean, roughly 2,000 people a year are killed in the workplace by electricity. So it says over the last 10 years, more than 20,000 workers have been injured, in electrical related incidents. And that's a lot, because, these people have families, they have, they want to go home at the end of their shift and not have to worry about something that can hurt or seriously hurt or kill them. Yet it happens all the time. And so, I mean, on the job safety is huge. So what would be some of the best ways, I mean, apart from what you're already talking about, I mean, is pretty much education, or just make sure that you're qualified, and if not, get somebody who's qualified to deal with whatever needs to be dealt with. Like, for example, in a place where there's a sign that says, hey, qualified personnel only, everybody else stay the heck away, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and if you don't know, ignorance isn't an excuse. When you're messing with electricity, it'll kill you. So you can't just say I didn't know. There's no do-overs. And it's not. And I'm not trying to be crass or funny, but it really comes down to that, where you don't know the danger that you're maybe putting yourself in. And so many times when they have just regular general building inspections, they have these marked off areas, and they have people that have ladders inside fenced off areas, or they have, the mop bucket inside areas that you don't know what room or you're going into, where there could be some energy in those areas that, you don't have any clue what danger you're putting yourself in, and or potentially causing a bigger problem for somebody else that is coming in to service the equipment or something like that. So
one of the cool things you have on the website is this electrical safety self-assessment area. So there are these electrical safety awareness videos, and, how do you know, introduces the problem of electrical injuries and fatalities, and what does electrical safety mean? And you've got some different perspectives on it from managers and supervisors and employees about different things. So, I mean, this is a neat tool here that you're providing to people that they can go and take. So tell us a little bit more about this self-assessment tool here on the website.
So what it is we work with the people that put out the best codes and standards that are out there. We hope people that follow those codes and standards to the T. But there are some things and gaps that we identified that will kind of give you an idea of how you're rating against folks similar to yourself. So you're safety minded. You're listening to this broadcast, and what we're trying to do is tell people, here are some things that you might not be thinking about. So not to get too deep into things, but how often are you servicing your personal protective equipment, your PPE? Do you have the right cleaning system set up for that? Are you using the right tools for the job, and do you inspect those tools all the time? Are you using, if you're working with electricity, are you using testers, and are you testing those testers every time, before and after? It sounds kind of monotonous, but those are the things that will keep you alive. And if you look at what we call the hierarchy of controls, there's a lot of built-in safety to a lot of the different systems that we work with.